A scientist is in the process of creating synthetic skin when his laboratory is blown up by gangsters. After being burned beyond recognition and permanently altered by an experimental medical procedure, he assumes alternate identities to exact revenge. The movie opens in a factory near the seashore, where the owner of the factory is seen waiting for someone at the factory. A man named Robert Durant arrives with his men at the factory. After being thoroughly checked, Robert and his men are brought inside the factory. Robert is a real estate mafia and has come close to taking over the factory by force. The owner refuses to hand him the factory. Robert signals one of his men, who starts to shoot after taking out a gun from his fake leg. All the men at the factory are killed, and Robert kidnaps the owner, taking over the factory. Then he cuts off the factory owner's fingers. Meanwhile, a scientist named Peyton is seen doing research on synthetic skin with his lab partner. He is creating synthetic skin to be used to treat people who have been burnt in a fire. Peyton is successful in making synthetic skin and tries to stabilize it. However, the skin remains stable for only 99 minutes. The cells of the skin scatter and turn into liquid at the 100th minute. Peyton expresses hope to his lab assistant that they can make the skin perfect soon. Later, Peyton is seen with his girlfriend Julie. Both of them look at their old pictures together. The next morning, Julie, who is a government lawyer, is seen busy with her work. When she is leaving for work, Peyton proposes to her for marriage. Julie only responds by saying she loves Peyton, but does not respond to the proposal. Later, Julie meets a rich businessman, Lewis, who wants to make a modern colony. He plans to give employment to many people in his colony. To get the land, he bribed many people at the Land Commission. Julie is visiting Lewis because she saw the papers and is a lawyer working for the commission. She also knows that Lewis has bribed the commission for the land. When she inquires about it, Lewis does not deny it, as he says it is his biggest dream. He says he is doing it for the betterment of society. Upon hearing Lewis, Julie believes him. Lewis asks Julie about the whereabouts of the papers of the commission. Julie tells him that she does not know. He warns Julie that Robert is after the land as well, and if he gets it, it will be horrible. In the meantime, Peyton works in his laboratory with his lab assistant on developing the synthetic skin. While he is working, there is a power outage. Peyton finds his experiment has been successful. Even after 99 minutes, the skin cells do not scatter and they remain stable. Peyton tells his assistant that the experiment is successful when there is no light. As Peyton excitedly tells his assistant, Robert comes along with his men to get the papers. The papers are at Peyton's house. Robert's men kill Peyton's assistant. Robert burns Peyton's hands and throws him into acid. After finding the papers, they burn down the laboratory and leave. An explosion occurs at the laboratory, and Peyton's body gets thrown into the nearby river. After just a few days, Julie is seen standing by Peyton's grave. Julie thinks it is Peyton's grave, but actually it is his assistant's grave. During the explosion, the face of Peyton's assistant got burnt, and he was beyond recognition. Everyone thought it was Peyton. Meanwhile, Peyton is seen in a hospital, and his whole body is burnt. The doctors do surgery, to which he feels no pain, but as a side effect, he develops anger problems. Once Peyton gains consciousness, he jumps out of the window of the hospital. He roams around in the rain and eventually finds Julie. When Julie sees him, she does not recognize him and gets scared and runs away. Peyton realizes that he has to stay away from Julie until he finds a way to fix his face. He goes to his laboratory and gets sad looking at the burnt remains. Peyton decides to make the synthetic skin again. The next day, Peyton goes into a closed and abandoned factory. He starts his research again by setting up his lab. He starts to make his face from the synthetic skin, but unfortunately, he only has a burnt picture of his half-face. Therefore, he is not able to make his skin immediately. It is revealed that it will take 570 hours to make his face from the synthetic skin. In addition, Peyton looks at his hands and feels furious about Robert. He decides to take revenge on Robert. At night, Julie goes to Lewis's party, and Lewis tries to come close to her. Julie gets uncomfortable and leaves. Peyton is also present there, but he looks at everything through a window. Peyton spots one of Robert's men who killed his assistant. After a while, when Robert's man comes out, Peyton gets a hold of him. Peyton tortures him and asks about Robert's whereabouts. The man tells him that every week Robert comes to take money. He also tells him that there's another man involved in smuggling money named Paulie. Peyton then leaves him stuck in the gutter in the middle of the road where he is smashed by a bus. The next day, Peyton finds Paulie and takes pictures of his face and hands. He also takes pictures of Paulie's friends. After taking the pictures, Peyton goes back to his laboratory and creates a synthetic skin of Paulie. The synthetic skin turns out to be perfect, and Peyton wears it. Later, Peyton goes to Paulie's house and knocks him out using chloroform. Peyton, disguised as Paulie, goes to the restaurant to collect the money. He takes a big briefcase of money and leaves. After a while, Robert comes to Paulie's house to ask about the money. Paulie tries to justify himself for oversleeping, but Robert finds train tickets in his room. Robert suspects that Paulie was planning to steal his money and run away. As a result, he throws Paulie out of the window, killing him. While Paulie's body is lying on the car, Peyton is also seen sitting on the bench, disguised as Paulie. A woman starts screaming in shock when she looks at Peyton disguised as Paulie. Peyton starts to feel the skin cracking and sees the time, which shows 98 minutes. He leaves and runs back to his laboratory. He starts to feel awful for killing 2 people. Later, at his laboratory, he starts to work on the synthetic skin again, but gets frustrated when it does not stabilize after 99 minutes. He starts to break things in anger and has flashbacks of the horrible day. As he is still angry, he hears the computer tell him that the synthetic skin of his face is ready. The next day, he wears his synthetic skin and goes to the graveyard to meet Julie. When Julie sees him, she freaks out, but Peyton calms her down. He tells her the truth and asks if she would love him even if he did not have the same face. Julie seems confused and tells him that she is unsure. Later, at night, Robert calls one of his men to tell him that, due to Paulie, he has suffered a loss. He also tells him that he will go to Chinatown himself to get the money. Peyton hears Robert's conversation through a transmitter. He then makes a synthetic skin of Robert. The next day, he wears the synthetic skin of Robert and goes to a bookshop. In the shop, he points a gun at the shopkeeper, then looks into the camera and tells his name. The police come to Robert's house and arrest him. Peyton, looking like Robert, goes to Chinatown and collects the money. He keeps looking at his watch to check for the 99 minutes. As he is about to leave, the real Robert arrives and gets shocked to see his look-alike. Robert tells his men to shoot at Peyton, but they get confused as to who they should shoot. At the same time, Peyton's skin starts to melt, and he distracts the men and runs away. Afterwards, Peyton meets up with Julie at a carnival. At the carnival, Peyton gets angry with one of the shopkeepers for not giving him the prize and breaks his fingers. At that moment, Peyton's skin starts to melt, and he runs away. Julie, shocked by his behavior, follows him to the factory. She finds different masks, and she understands that something bad has happened to Peyton. She calls out to him and tells him not to hide from her. She tells him that she can help him. Peyton keeps looking at her from a distance, but does not come out. The next day, Julie visits Lewis's office. She tells Lewis about Peyton being alive. The phone rings, and Lewis goes to answer it. Meanwhile, Julie comes across the papers of the commission, which were supposedly burnt. It is revealed that Robert works for Lewis, and Lewis ordered him to burn the laboratory. Lewis also confessed that it was he who killed Peyton. Julie is shocked and leaves her office. Once she leaves, Lewis calls Robert and tells him about Peyton being alive. Lewis tells Robert to follow Julie. Later, Julie goes to Peyton's factory, where he is watching her from the window. While Peyton is looking at Julie, Robert and his men arrive and kidnap Julie. Peyton follows them and is about to save Julie when Robert arrives on a helicopter. Robert starts to shoot at Peyton, but he manages to save himself and gets into his factory. Unluckily, Robert's men enter the factory as well and start to shoot at Peyton. Peyton starts to kill all the men by wearing their look-alike synthetic skins, which he has already made ahead of time. After killing all the men, he comes back to Robert in the helicopter. Robert pushes him from the helicopter, but Peyton manages to save himself by taking the support rope attached to the helicopter. Robert tells the pilot to increase the speed of the helicopter to kill Peyton, but is unsuccessful in doing so. Seeing a truck, Peyton ties the helicopter rope to it, which causes the helicopter to crash and explode. After a while, Robert goes to meet Lewis. In reality, it is Peyton who is wearing the skin of Robert. Lewis has Julie with him and takes them to the top floor of the building. When they reach the top, Lewis takes off Peyton's skin, exposing his real face. Peyton and Lewis have an intense fight. Eventually, Peyton throws Lewis off the building, killing him. Later, Julie sees Peyton's real face and tells him that he can wear artificial skin, but she will never leave him. Peyton tells her that he is dead not only from the outside, but also changed from the inside. He has turned into a monster, and no one can live with him. He then leaves Julie and goes away. Julie follows, calling for him, but he disappears into the crowd. Before disappearing forever, Peyton looks at Julie for a while. The movie ends with Peyton saying that, "I am everyone and no one, everywhere and nowhere. Call me Darkman." If you enjoyed this movie recap, make sure to hit the like button. And if you want to see more of these, subscribe to the channel and check out our other videos.